I never loved you so. This gift is for the woman I've secretly been in love with for the past 8 years. That's what my son-in-law said at his own wedding, standing right beside my daughter. Then, in front of everyone, he walked right past her and handed the gift to her best friend. The room went dead silent. My daughter's smile froze midair and the orchestra's music died one broken note at a time. You could feel the shame crawl across the hall. I watched guests pretending not to look, but every eye was burning through my child's tears. Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Because what came after that sentence shattered everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family. The wedding hall that once overflowed with laughter and soft music now felt like a frozen nightmare. The air itself seemed to thicken with humiliation. Guests whispered behind gloved hands, some forcing nervous laughs to hide the unbearable tension that had settled over us like a suffocating blanket. My daughter, my beautiful, trusting daughter, stood there motionless in her ivory gown, holding back tears that threatened to destroy her mascara and her dignity in one devastating flood. The groom kept smiling as if his words meant nothing, as if he hadn't just ripped out her heart and displayed it for 300 witnesses to see. The best friend trembled as she accepted the gift, her face pale as winter frost, knowing she had just become the other woman in the most public way imaginable. Even the chandeliers seemed ashamed to shine, their crystal tears catching the light but casting shadows across the destruction below. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to my daughter. Not on this day. Not ever. My inner voice became sharp and cold, cutting through the chaos like a blade. While everyone watched this emotional massacre unfold, while they recorded it on their phones and whispered their shock, I quietly left the hall. My heels echoed against the marble floors like drumbeats of vengeance, each step carrying the weight of a mother's fury and the promise of justice. I walked through the corridor to the media room, my hands steady despite the rage boiling in my chest. The camera operators looked at me, confused, probably wondering why the mother of the bride was storming into their space with fire in her eyes. "Play the footage," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. They hesitated, exchanging glances, unsure of what I meant or what authority I held in this moment of chaos. "Project it." Right now, I insisted, my voice trembling not with fear, but with controlled authority that comes from a mother protecting her child. The lights dimmed, and the large screen behind the couple flickered to life. At first, guests thought it was part of the program, perhaps a romantic slideshow or a surprise video message. But then they saw it. They saw him. They saw her. The same woman he had just publicly declared his love for, the same woman who had stood beside my daughter as her maid of honor, the same woman who had helped her choose that very wedding dress. The secret footage played out like a nightmare made real. Laughter between them in hotel corridors. Intimate dinners in darkened restaurants. Stolen kisses in parking garages. Declarations of love whispered in shadows. Dates that happened while my daughter planned seating charts and tasted wedding cakes. Hotel receipts with timestamps that proved this betrayal had been happening under our noses for months, maybe years. The gasp started small and grew into a chorus of outrage that filled every corner of that hall. My daughter covered her face with her hands, her bouquet falling to the floor in a cascade of white roses and baby's breath. The groom froze in horror, his face draining of all color as he watched his deception exposed frame by frame. The best friend stepped back, her hand shaking so violently that the gift he had given her clattered to the ground. The room turned chaotic. Whispers became accusations. Murmurs rose like thunder. Camera flashes lit up the darkness as guests captured every moment of this spectacular implosion. Phone screens glowed like angry eyes, recording the destruction of what should have been the happiest day of my daughter's life. But this was only the beginning. Justice has many faces, and I had prepared them all. Just as the video ended, red and blue lights flashed through the stained glass windows of the chapel. The police had arrived, right on schedule. 20 minutes earlier, while everyone had been watching the ceremony with tears of joy, I had made the call that would change everything. I called them 20 minutes earlier, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos as officers stepped through the entrance. Because that man didn't just lie to my daughter, he lied to the law. The groom's father tried to intervene, tried to step between his son and the approaching officers, but he collapsed as they mentioned his name. His face went ashen, his legs buckled, and suddenly everyone understood that this humiliation ran deeper than adultery. This was about corruption, about lies that stretched far beyond matters of the heart. You see, I had done my research. When my daughter first brought him home, something felt wrong. Call it mother's intuition, or call it the instinct of a woman who had survived enough betrayal to recognize its scent. I hired a private investigator, expecting to find evidence of cheating. What I found was so much worse. The wedding we were attending, this lavish display of crystal and champagne, of imported flowers and orchestral music, had been funded with stolen charity money. Money meant for children's hospitals. Money donated by grieving families who believed their contributions would save lives. Money that instead paid for centerpieces and a 7-tier cake while sick children waited for treatments that would never come. The family had been running this scheme for years, using their charity foundation as their personal bank account, funding their lifestyle while presenting themselves as pillars of the community. The investigation had been building for months, and I had simply provided the final pieces of evidence they needed to make their arrests. The guests were stunned into silence as the reality of what they were witnessing sank in. This wasn't just a wedding gone wrong. This was the exposure of criminals who had hidden behind smiles and Sunday church attendance while stealing from the most vulnerable members of society. The wedding turned into a crime scene. The beautiful hall, with its flowing fabric and twinkling lights, became the backdrop for handcuffs and Miranda rights. The altar where my daughter should have been kissed by her new husband instead became the stage where justice finally found its voice. The groom dropped to his knees right there on the marble floor, his expensive tuxedo wrinkling as he crumpled under the weight of his exposure. "I never wanted this," he muttered, but his words were empty, meaningless sounds that couldn't undo years of deception. The best friend fainted, her body hitting the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the sudden silence. Whether from guilt or shock or the overwhelming realization of what she had participated in, I didn't know and I didn't care. My daughter cried, not the gentle tears of joy that should have marked this day, but the broken sobs of a woman torn between rage and heartbreak. She looked at me with eyes that held confusion, betrayal, gratitude, and pain all swirled together in a mixture too complex for words. "I didn't raise my daughter for deceit to stand beside her at the altar," I said, my voice carrying across the hall with the authority of absolute truth. The police led the groom away, his hands cuffed behind his back, his head hanging in shame. His father was loaded into an ambulance, his heart unable to handle the stress of watching his son's crimes exposed and his own life's work revealed as a house of cards built on theft and lies. I helped my daughter stand, my hands steady on her arms as she swayed in her wedding dress. My strength became her anchor in that moment, the one solid thing in a world that had just revealed itself to be built on quicksand. Night fell over the empty hall, and we sat there among the scattered flowers and ruined decorations. My daughter's white gown was now stained with tears, her carefully arranged hair falling in loose strands around her face. She looked so young, so broken, like the little girl who used to run to me when playground bullies made her cry. "I used to think love was proven by words," I told her, my voice softer now, gentler, carrying the weight of a lifetime's worth of lessons learned the hard way. "But today, I learned that love is proven by truth, even when it destroys everything around it." She leaned against me, and I held her the way I had when she was small, when a scraped knee or a bad dream was the worst pain she could imagine. How I wished we could go back to those simple hurts, to problems that could be solved with bandages and bedtime stories. "You didn't lose a husband tonight," I whispered into her hair. "You lost a liar who pretended to be one." And sometimes, losing a lie is the only way to find the truth. We sat there as the cleaning crew began to dismantle the decorations, as the flowers were swept into garbage bags and the candles were blown out one by one. The fairy tale was over, but maybe, just maybe, the real story was about to begin. I thought about all the signs I had seen and ignored, all the red flags I had dismissed because I wanted my daughter to be happy. The way he never quite looked her in the eye when he said he loved her. The phone calls he took in private. The business trips that seemed to happen whenever she needed him most. The way his family always seemed to be struggling financially despite their lavish lifestyle. I thought about the children in those hospitals, waiting for treatments that had been delayed because money meant for their care had instead been spent on champagne and caviar. I thought about the families who had donated their last dollars, believing they were contributing to something meaningful, something that would make a difference. I thought about my daughter, who had planned this wedding with such joy, such hope, such innocent belief that she had found her forever person. Who had spent months agonizing over guest lists and menu choices, who had lost sleep worrying about seating arrangements and whether the flowers would be fresh. The pain in my chest was physical, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. This was my child, my baby, and I had to watch her world explode in the most public way possible. But I also knew that I had done the right thing, the only thing a mother could do when faced with such a choice. Better she learn the truth now, surrounded by family who would help her heal, than years from now when she might have children of her own, when the lies would have grown so deep and complex that escaping them would be nearly impossible. Better she face this pain now, while she was young and strong and beautiful enough to start over, than waste decades of her life loving someone who was incapable of loving her back. The investigator had given me a choice. I could have used the information quietly, arranged for her to discover his infidelity in private, spared her the public humiliation. But private betrayals have a way of staying buried, of being excused and forgiven and repeated. Public exposure leaves no room for denial, no space for him to talk his way back into her life with flowers and apologies and promises that mean nothing. I wanted the world to see what he was, so that when he tried to crawl back, and he would try, she would remember not just his betrayal, but the way everyone she cared about had witnessed it. She would remember that loving him meant choosing him over her own dignity, over the respect of everyone who mattered to her. The weeks that followed were dark ones. My daughter barely left her room, barely ate, barely spoke. She would stare out her window for hours, still wearing the engagement ring she couldn't quite bring herself to remove. I wanted to take it from her finger myself, to throw it in the garbage where it belonged, but I knew she had to make that choice herself. The media attention was intense. The story had everything: a wedding day betrayal, a charity scandal, a mother's revenge. Reporters called constantly, wanting interviews, wanting details, wanting to turn my daughter's pain into entertainment for strangers. I protected her from all of it, becoming a wall between her fragile heart and a world hungry for drama. The groom tried to call from jail. I answered the phone once, heard his voice saying her name, and hung up before he could say another word. He had lost the right to speak her name, lost the right to ask for her forgiveness, lost the right to exist in her world. His family reached out too, trying to explain, trying to minimize, trying to make excuses for the inexcusable. His mother came to our door with tears and apologies, claiming she had no idea about the charity fraud, insisting that her son really did love my daughter despite everything. I listened politely and then told her that love without honesty isn't love at all. It's just cruelty wearing a prettier mask. The best friend never contacted us. She disappeared from social media, left town, started over somewhere else where nobody knew her story. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had been manipulated too, used as a weapon against my daughter without fully understanding the game being played. But a larger part of me couldn't forgive her for accepting that gift, for standing there and letting him humiliate my child while she said nothing. Months passed. The criminal trial dominated local news. The charity scandal grew larger as investigators uncovered more victims, more stolen donations, more lies built upon lies. The groom's father died in prison, his heart finally giving out under the weight of his guilt. The son pleaded guilty and received a sentence that would keep him away from my daughter for many years to come. Slowly, gradually, my daughter began to heal. She started eating again, started leaving her room, started talking about the future instead of just surviving each day. She enrolled in graduate school, threw herself into her studies, began building a life that belonged entirely to her. She never thanked me for what I did that day. I didn't expect her to. What mother wants gratitude for destroying her child's dreams, even when those dreams were built on lies? But sometimes I would catch her looking at me with something like understanding in her eyes, as if she was beginning to see that love sometimes means making impossible choices. One evening, almost a year later, she finally took off the engagement ring. She didn't make an announcement, didn't ceremonially throw it away. She simply set it on her dresser one night and never put it back on. The next morning, I found it in the garbage, buried under coffee grounds and yesterday's newspaper. I left it there. She started dating again eventually, but differently this time. More carefully, more thoughtfully. She asked harder questions, set firmer boundaries, trusted her instincts instead of just her hopes. She had learned that love without truth is just another form of abuse, and she refused to accept anything less than complete honesty from anyone who wanted to be part of her life. I watched her become stronger, watched her learn to value herself in ways she never had before. The woman who emerged from that devastation was more beautiful than the girl who had walked down that aisle, more confident, more self-aware, more willing to demand the respect she deserved. And I realized that sometimes the greatest gift a mother can give her child isn't protection from pain, but the truth that allows them to avoid even greater pain down the road. Sometimes love means watching them fall so they can learn to fly on their own. If you've ever protected someone you love from betrayal, or found the courage to stand for truth when it hurt the most, I want to hear from you. Comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because your story might give strength to another mother tonight. Sometimes, the greatest gift a mother gives her child is the truth, no matter how painful it is. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is destroy someone's present to save their future. That day at the altar, I didn't just stop a wedding. I stopped a lifetime of lies from taking root in my daughter's heart. She deserved better than a love built on deception. She deserved better than a man who could look her in the eyes and promise forever while planning to give his heart to someone else. She deserved better than a future funded by stolen hope and charity meant for dying children. That day, I chose truth over comfort, justice over peace, my daughter's future over her present happiness. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Because that's what mothers do. We stand guard over our children's hearts, even when they don't understand why we're fighting. The wedding ended in ruins, but my daughter's life began that day. The real version of her life, built on truth instead of lies, on self-respect instead of desperate love, on the knowledge that she deserves nothing less than complete honesty from anyone who claims to care about her. And that, more than any fairy tale wedding, more than any white dress or promised forever, is the greatest gift I could ever give her. The gift of knowing her own worth and the courage to demand it from a world that will try to convince her to settle for less. That's my story. That's why I destroyed my daughter's wedding day to save her life. And I sleep peacefully every night knowing that somewhere out there, she's building a future worthy of the amazing woman she's become. A future that no liar will ever be able to touch again.